Hi all, my name is Charlie Manning, and I'm going to be talking about the work I've done at FUSF Foundation to analyze and streamline our internal research funding pipeline. We initiated this analysis and intervention process in late 2020, motivated by a sense that our research funding apparatus could function more efficiently than it currently was. Funding research is at the heart of the Foundation's mission, and this mission is time sensitive. We were and are thus very concerned with the speed at which we process funding requests, make funding decisions, and deliver funding dollars. Faster means more high impact research is conducted sooner, which in turn gives us a chance to make breakthroughs sooner that can change patients' lives. Our primary goal was to develop a systematic understanding of the timing dynamics of the research funding process that we could use to both identify our areas for streamlining interventions and to track changes in the process over time, ideally progress towards efficiency. We were open to multiple courses of action depending on what insights the analysis yielded, but a general goal going in was to identify which steps of our research process were dragging and find ways to tighten them up. This research funding apparatus, which I'll refer to as our research funding pipeline, or research funding process from here on out, stretches from our initial receipt and processing of proposal abstracts through the full proposal process and peer review phase to full execution of research funding contracts. We model this process in 8 distinct steps, grouped into 3 broader phases. These phases track onto the current status of the proposal item as it moves through the pipeline: abstract, then proposal, then contract. There is also an additional phase which proposals move through in some cases: proposal revision. This occurs when we request a proposal owner revise their proposal and resubmit it for consideration based on internal discussion and comments from external peer reviewers. In this case, we essentially repeat the proposal phase. Once we had modeled the research funding pipeline in the abstract, we went about actually populating the model with real data from the last 4 years of our research funding activities. The base sample we used was all projects initiated between January 1st, 2016 and January 1st, 2020. This 4-year chunk of data we felt was a sufficiently large sample, whilst not extending so far back as to pull in data from previous eras where our process differed meaningfully. To measure the chronology of historical projects, we drew on records in Editorial Manager, our proposal management software, and our catalog of executed contract records. Much of this work had to be done manually, sifting through project records and entering dates in Excel spreadsheets by hand. Once complete, though, we had a full data set of individual project timelines spanning 4 years of the Foundation's research funding process. Analysis on these timelines was conducted primarily in Excel, using the built-in functions for calculating mean, median, range, and standard deviation. We organized the data into cohorts by step, so all data for a given step, say time from abstract submission to decision on abstract, was pulled from all projects in the sample and amalgamated for analysis. The primary statistic in our analysis of each step was mean. By stacking the means for all steps, we could construct a generalized timeline for our research funding pipeline between 2016 and 2020. The secondary statistics proved useful as well, though, particularly in conducting later targeted analysis into certain steps and how we could streamline them. A mean pulled significantly higher than its corresponding median by a high outlier, for instance, was a good indicator that we could bring down average times by eliminating isolated cases of lagging actions. A result of this analysis, a generalized timeline of our research funding pipeline for this sample, constructed from the means for each steps, is displayed here as a flowchart. This is the first half of it. With a clear model of how long each step took on average in our sample, and knowing, of course, which steps we could influence most directly, we began planning interventions to streamline the process. The primary intervention we implemented was simple, but we found ultimately effective. For the steps of the process we had complete or at least meaningful control over, we set progressive quarterly goals for decreasing average time to completion. The power of this intervention was perhaps largely in increasing time-sensitive awareness for those involved in moving the process along. With clear targets to aim at and transparent measuring of progress, we found that within the first couple of quarters, we were able to significantly decrease the average timetables for a number of key steps in the process. The effectiveness of this more passive intervention was, however, limited to optimization within the current system. A more concrete change we made was increasing the frequency of our decision-making meetings. This was targeted at decreasing the average time to completion of some of the steps that functioned in and around these meetings: time from abstract submitted to decision to invite full proposal or reject abstract, that's the same step there. Time from full proposal submission to peer reviewers assigned. This step was not entirely dependent on our decision group meeting, but was expedited by it. And time from peer review complete to funding decision. This alteration to the structure of our research funding pipeline certainly increased efficiency, as the average time taken in these steps dropped significantly. Worth noting, however, is that this increase in process efficiency, it did require more meeting time from multiple staff members. We felt that the allocation of staff time was warranted, but it regardless cannot be considered a pure increase in efficiency. Another more procedural change we made was in how we conducted our peer review. Our analysis showed that peer review was generally one of the most time-consuming steps, in large part owing to our dependence on the timelines of independent reviewers getting back to us with their comments. Additionally, in our previous system, a project manager was solely responsible for corresponding with reviewers, sending them reminders, and generally attempting to move the process along. To relieve this bottleneck, we restructured our internal handling of peer reviews so that multiple members of our proposal review team could work with reviewers at once. This expansion of personnel involved in the process also resulted in an expanded pool of available reviewers, as the new individuals involved in soliciting reviews each brought with them their own expanded network of connections to draw on. With more of our staff involved in the peer review process, we were able to find appropriate reviewers more quickly, maintain more constant communication with reviewers, and thus also ultimately get proposals reviewed sooner. Overall, our cycle of analysis and intervention led to more efficiency in our research funding process. The structural change to increase decision-making frequency and the more passive mechanism of setting progressive goals for efficiency certainly produced lower average times to completion across the process. In Q2 of 2022, the average time it took to make an invite reject decision on an abstract was down over 50% from the 2016 through 2020 sample. The time it took to invite peer reviewers after full proposal submission was down 65%. The time it took to make a funding decision following completion of peer review was down 30%. And in previous quarters, it had been down from the initial sample mean by over 70%. Which intervention was specifically responsible for which increases in efficiency is harder to say, but our sense is that they were both effective and even worked in concert to heighten awareness internally around our organizational desire to move faster. The changes to how we conducted peer review also yielded results, with the average duration of peer review decreasing by over 50% from our initial sample to Q2 of 2022. Going forward, we continue to monitor the average timelines of key steps in the pipeline and update our efficiency targets quarterly. We have also already performed follow-up analyses using the model established with our initial sample, bringing in data from newer projects for comparison with the initial group, as well as generating project type specific timelines, non-clinical versus clinical projects, for instance, for side-by-side comparison. And we plan to continue performing analyses as more current data is created through our process. Our hope is that through both periodic and continuous analysis, we can maintain the gains in efficiency rendered through this process and make more in the future. The efficiency of our research funding pipeline has a direct influence on our core mission. An efficient funding pipeline means more critical research being funded faster, which means helping patients sooner. And so it will remain a priority. Thank you for your time. If you're interested in further details, please reach out to myself and the foundation. Thank you.